This is a review of Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia by Stonemeyer Games. And it is an interesting worker placement game where you're rolling dice and placing the dice out on the board as workers. I'll go over some of the interesting features of the game. First of all, you have your dice, which are your workers, and you roll them, and this represents how smart they are or how much they're catching on to the dystopian society. And you want your workers to be smart, but you don't want them to be too smart that they figure things out and begin to rebel. So I just rolled 2 6s, and when you roll, you have to look at up here on the chart here whether or not your roll result, adding them together, which is 12, plus the number of brains power here that your workers have. So that's gonna give me up to 15. If you are less than or if you are greater than or equal to 16, you actually lose one of your workers. So it's possible to get more dice in the game, but the more dice you get, the more chance you're going to have of getting to that threshold of greater than or equal to 16 and actually losing a worker during the game. The other feature about the dice rolling is when you roll doubles, you get to place out those workers in the same turn. So essentially, it gives you an extra turn. I just rolled 2 6s, and I can place them out on the board. The board consists of 4 factions. You have the Euphorian faction, which is over here, and they're good at generating power, which is represented by these lightnings. You have, let's see, what do we have here? A subterranean territory, which is in control of a lot of the water. The wasteland, which is in control of a lot of the food. And the Icarite up in the sky, which has control over this kind of chemical compound here used to generate bliss. And you're just trying to gain influence in some of these territories, and essentially it's a race to get rid of your stars, and there are opportunities to place them out on the board in different sections. One of the sections are these territories here. Each territory has one of these sections where you can be placing out stars to get rid of them. Your starting card also has an opportunity to place a star in it to get rid of it. And so basically just keep going until you get rid of these stars. Oops, I'm dropping them all over the floor. Alright, so with my pair of 6s, one of the things I like to do early in the game is try and get myself another worker if possible. So one way to do it is to get some lightning or water. I'll just go over here and get some water. I place my die here, and then I go, this grid has different levels, 1 to 4, 5 to 8, and 9 and up. And what you do is you add all the dice that are actually here, your dice or any other player's dice, and that brings you to the column where you take an action. I'm at 6, so I'm going to go here where the 5 to 8 is, where it's going to give me a water, and I lose a brain here. So I'm going to get a water, bring it over. Next player would go, if they probably would have rolled their dice, or whoops, actually next player doesn't go because I have the doubles. I have to take my other turn. So I'm going to actually go right here, and now this brings this column up, this area up to 12, and which is over 9. So I'm going to actually get 2 waters now and add a brain. So I'm back where I was, but now I got 2 waters. That brings me up to 3, which is perfect for getting an extra worker, which you can get down in this space. You can see the power of rolling these doubles, and I'll talk a little bit more about my thoughts on that part of the game, but it's pretty powerful to get doubles and be able to take another turn. So just coincidentally, I rolled doubles with the other player, and they get to come out. And they might hop right into that and take advantage of the fact that this is already up to over 12 to get 2 waters for themselves. I'll place that out on their little card here. And, oh, for sake of variety, let's go up here and get a one of these bliss tokens. And that square, that particular area in that first column actually moves up this track. And as you move up this track, it opens up opportunities for those factions. Now you start the game with some cards that are associated with some of the factions, like here's the Icarite City in the Clouds, and this one here is the Subterraneans. And you start with one of these cards active, and this particular card was the one I would start with active. You get to choose which one, but when you bump another player's worker off, you may lose a heart to make that player gain a brain. If you do, gain a resource. And this one here, you start with one card not active. So when you open up lanes on here, you'll eventually get to the point down here where you can activate your other card, or you can also do it in one of these tunnels. These tunnels activate these faction cards here. Let's say, going back to my turn here, one of the things you can do on your turn is, if you have no more dice to place out, you can take a turn by pulling back your dice. And when you do that, you're either going to pay one of these foods or one of these bliss tokens, and you can gain 2 hearts. If you don't do that, you'll lose a heart. And what these hearts are your hand size for cards that you're going to be drawing in the game. And these cards are pretty neat because they represent like these sort of prohibited items that are in high demand in this dystopian society. Anything related to pleasure and that sort of thing. They're very desirable, and of course the elites in the dystopian society like to get their hands on those things in secret. So this is the amount of cards, hand size, that you can get for the cards. And those cards can be used to gain influence on these territories, which will help you get rid of some of your stars. So those are always useful to have. But at the beginning of the game, I'm not too worried about it because I can't go below 1. So I'm just going to take my dice back. So the green players, the only thing they can do is pull their dice back, and that's the end of their turn. Back to purple. When you pull your dice back, you're supposed to roll your dice right away. And I get 9 plus 3. I am still less than 16, so I'm fine. Green would have rolled their dice. They get 7 plus 3 is 10. They don't lose any workers. Everybody's good. So to do purple's turn, we're going to go right here. We're going to pay the 3 water, and we're going to get an extra worker, which we roll right away. It's available to us. And look, now I have doubles again. One of the other interesting things about these spaces is that some of these spaces, when there's a worker on it, the worker can be knocked off. And when a worker's knocked off, and I'll give you an example of that, let's say that it's green's turn here. And let's say, for argument's sake, green has enough water to go in this space. So green could come over here and go here in one of these spaces with the arrow and knock me off. But when it knocks me off, I re-roll it, and then I still have to check here on my dice total. And now I am at 14, 15, 16, 17. I am above the threshold. I'm actually going to lose a worker. So a lot of times getting your die back when someone knocks it off is beneficial, but in my case I had such high die rolls that I am losing a die. So there are times when it's advantageous actually to try and knock a player off and give them back their die when they really don't want it. So my worker, I just got all that for nothing. It's gone. There are some other areas on the board where there are these resources here, and you gain these resources by going to these tunnel areas. For example, let's say I don't have the resource, but if I go here, let's say I got an orange. Later on in the game, I could go here, pay the orange, and I can get a brick or a card. When I do that, this tunnel starts building, and this tunnel will be built out. And when you get to the end here, and I'm supposed to have a blocking token on it, which I don't have, this space is not available at the beginning of the game, but when it opens up, if you are part of that faction, you will now gain access to that resource here. So if you're part of this Wastelander faction, they've dug a tunnel over to start reaping the benefits of the Euphorian territory, and you can now place your dice there to take advantage of that if you have a card for that faction, and it turns out that this player does. So that's pretty neat concept in the game. I do like that. There are these buildings which start the game face down, and these can be built out with these resources. So for example, if I had gone here and maybe I wanted to collect a brick, later on in the game, let's say I've got my workers back, I could go on one of these spaces, pay the brick, and that worker stays out there. Well, I can remove him, but I'd want to keep that worker out there if I'm committing resources to it until this area is built. Now in a two-player game, it's only going to take 2 people to pay resources, and let's say green comes out here and pays the silver here, and this building gets built. What happens is this building slides over, and these go back to the players. They re-roll them immediately, and this building flips. And if you were someone who had committed resources to building this building, you get to place a star on it because you are part owner of this area. If you have not, then you're going to suffer a penalty. You may not add workers when you have 2 or 3 workers, so that's your penalty. Now you can get a star on it even if you didn't build it by going here and paying 3 cards or 2 matching cards and putting your die here. Then you can actually put a star on that, so you don't have to suffer the penalties. And all of these buildings have penalties if you don't build on it. Once you build on it, you have an action here which is available. You can go here and pay, in this case, a card and a resource, which will allow you to move up this faction on this tracker here, and it will allow you to place a star out here on this territory. So if I was able to pay and go here, I would be able to start getting some control on this subterranean society. And generally that's what you're doing in the game until you get rid of all your stars. These factions here are all very similar in how they play, and the only one that's different is that I think it's Icarite up in the clouds, and up there's a lot of kind of exchanging cards and resources areas, and that's generally how you play the game. Now, some of the features in the game that I like. I like this mechanic of putting a worker out and then being able to knock out that player. And then that player has to take the worker back into their hands and they have to roll it. And there is some risk to losing one of your dice when that happens. And there's a little bit of a pushy luck in the sense of how many workers do you want out? How much risk are you willing to take? When you have a lot of workers, sometimes you don't want them all back at once in your hand, so you're going to have them out on the board. You might be able to keep them out And when you call your workers back, you don't have to take all of your workers back. Sometimes you might want to leave them out. So there are some flexibility when you have more workers. But when you get them all at once back and you have to roll them, there's that risk of losing them. Now, there is luck value in that part of possibly losing your workers. I don't mind that part of it very much. But what I don't like is that when you roll doubles, you get to place the extra dice that you rolled the doubles with. So if I roll 2 5s, and when you have more workers, you have more of a chance to do that, I get to place both of these now. Which, to me, this is a bit of an Achilles heel for this game, because being that, time, you're trying to get rid of these, and an extra turn or two during a game, it can be a pretty big deal in getting you ahead, and this can really change things in the game, and it's just this complete element of luck. Now, I don't mind that part of the game of getting of being able to stay at or below 16. But that combined with this other element of rolling doubles, to me, it gets to the point where I'm think it begins to take away from the game. I think I don't like this concept of the doubles, because it can really change the course of the game, and it has really nothing to do with how you're playing the game at all. If you roll a couple of doubles in a row, you're going to take the lead. There's really no ifs, ands, and buts about it, because the choices on the board, they're not particularly complex. I mean, you've got to decide which direction you're going to go, and if you got more actions, you're going to be able to get more stars off your board faster. It's as simple as that. So I don't really like this concept here of the doubles much at all. I can live with the concept of the less than or greater than 16, and I think that is very thematic for the game. As your workers are getting smarter, you can actually lose them because they wise up to the society and the brainwashing and all that. But the doubles, I have a hard time explaining or even thinking how that's even thematically connected. I mean, I guess it offsets the potential for losing a die when you roll a lot of them. Hey, you get more of a chance to get a double, so even if you lose a die, maybe you got a double. I can see that point of it, but I still think that those doubles really do change the course of the game a lot more than I'd like to see. So there's that aspect of it. I do like these tunnels. I think that's a pretty nice idea on the board. I like the idea of these buildings. I like, that if you don't participate in building a building, there's a possible negative effect that you're going to suffer. But the other thing I don't like about the building, and they're all kind of cute, got these cute things on it, like Academy of Mandatory Equality. You may not use recruits' special abilities. A dystopian idea. Everybody's equal to the point where you can't be different. I mean, they all have these really neat thematic messages on them, but all of the buildings, they all do the same thing. They would just require different resources. So when the building opens up, all you're going to be doing is going to the space and getting rid of a star. It doesn't really do anything else special for you. So essentially all these buildings are really just the same thing, just maybe a different penalty on it, and a different resource requirement for getting it. So I think that's a bit of a missed opportunity on this board. I think it would have been more interesting if some of these buildings were more desirable to have, and if that were the case, I probably would want to get a glimpse as to what the building actually is on this side, so you would know which building you would be more interested in going for, or what building would fit with the strategy that you're going for. Whereas right now, I mean, you don't need to know what's on the other side of it because they're all the same. So, you know, that was an opportunity, I think, that was a little bit missed in this game. Another thing is that all of these areas here on the board, you have got Euphoria, you've got, what's this one called again? Subterranea, the Wastelander. These spaces are they're all identical. And they do exactly the same things, except they have a different resource. I think it would have been more interesting to have had some differences in these areas. I mean, there are 3 areas, but they're essentially the same area with a different resource. The only thing different is the Icarites at the top of the board. So I'm at least glad they've got something different in the game at the top of the board. But these other strategies, whatever you're going for, you're going for the same strategy, basically. It's just with a different resource. And sometimes you have to mix and match a little bit, but there isn't that much variety in how these buildings and how these areas play out, other than that Icarite at the top of the board. I would like to have seen maybe a little bit more, some more differences in how they play. I think the tunnel idea was pretty neat, though. I think that kind of fits the theme of these societies trying to fight with each other and infiltrate each other. This track here is nice. As it builds up, it opens up more abilities for the factions as they come out, and you have these cards that you get at the beginning of the game, and there is a way to get more cards. For example, everybody has a starting card with a different, you know, they're a little bit different with the resources on them, but you have a choice in the game where you can take one of these forbidden items, these cards here, and either keep it, either draw 2 recruits and keep one, which is sort of the good side, and the bad side is commit yourself to the evils of the dystopia, burn the whatever that is, destroy it, and you get to place a star on the card. The thing is, though, I always choose the star because the recruits, to me, especially by the time you get to the point in the game where you'd want to do that, the recruit abilities didn't really grab me as being very helpful in a lot of times. It's great that you start with them and they can be helpful, but the cards don't make you want to rush out and get them as part of your strategy, at least in my opinion. So I didn't find the cards themselves to be all that interesting. So again, I think this was an opportunity missed. I think the cards could have been added something else to the game. I think like in a game like Alien Frontiers, and this is, to me, similar in the sense that it's a race. In Alien Frontiers, you're racing to get rid of get your colonies out. In this, you're in a race to get rid of this. The cards in Alien Frontiers are a lot more interesting, and they're a very integral part of that game, and they're very important, and you can really base a strategy in that game on the cards. Whereas here, I don't feel as much. Now, maybe an expert player who really knows these cards really well it's going to click more, but I didn't find the cards very interesting. And I even think that Stonemaier Games has actually redone these cards. They're kind of saving them for when they do the next edition of this game. I don't know what's been done to the cards specifically, but one of the things I found in the game is there are certain cards that I think are more desirable at the beginning of the game and other cards that are more desirable later in the game. So when you draw your starting cards and you get to draft, you get to have a choice between 4 cards, you get to keep 2. There are some cards in here which can give you, like for example this one right here. When you place a worker on the generator, if you have no cards in hand, also gain one of these foods. early in a game, I think this is a really nice card to have because you're not going to have any cards in your hand in your hand anyways early in the game. So every time you go to this generator, you're going to get a food. Whereas a lot of these other cards, like for example this one, when you visit a non-Icarite market, you may pay 2 cards to place an extra star. That's great later on in the game, but at the beginning of the game, it does you no good. So if you draw a bunch of cards that don't give you any way to help you get resources early in the game, you're going to be stuck with these cards that aren't useful at the beginning, and you're already behind a little bit in what you can do or the resources you can get. So you can fall behind, and when you fall behind in a race game like this, it is hard to recover. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there should have been some cards which are starting cards that you could draw from that are a little bit more balanced, and then some late game cards, and you can draw a late game card and a starting scenario type of a card, so that they were more there was less, there'd be less chance of really getting a really bad draw on these cards early in the game. And a lot of these cards, they can do something good, but they do something bad to you too. You gain, so that's what makes them really sort of not that great a lot of the time, in my opinion. A little disappointed with the card play on it. I mean, they're okay. I'm glad they're there, but they didn't grab me. So, the other thing about the game was a lot of the games that I play I play a lot of games with my wife, and it's usually 2-player. I mean, I play, I go to game nights and things like that and get to play with other people, and I go to conventions and stuff. But probably the majority of the plays that I get on a game are 2-player. And I didn't find this particularly engaging as a 2-player game. And it definitely, I've played it with more people, and I think it's better with more people. The problem with the 2-player game is, for example, if one player tries to go out and get on one of these buildings, then you've got to kind of copycat and try and get it too. You don't want to let them just get the building, and then all of a sudden you've got this negative effect on you. So it seems to me like in a 2-player, it just seems to be like there's a lot of copycatting. You want to try to, if someone starts going for one of these buildings, you want to try to get in there too. And sometimes the doubles issue again. Like I said, didn't like that. In a 2-player game, that can really cause some swings. So, it just seemed when I play it, there's a sort of a lot of copycatting of what the other player's doing, and it kind of comes down to sort of grabbing these sort of buildings here and timing of it, and you want to try to grab them and be able to grab it all at once, and the only way to do that is to roll a double if you want to grab it without the other player having an opportunity, or to get them in a position where they don't have any resources to get it. So, I mean, there's a little bit of back and forth, but it's still, it's a little bit of a copycatting thing. And then it goes from one zone, okay, yeah, we got this building, okay, and we're going to fight over this building over here doing the same thing. You're going to put a resource there, then I'm going to go for a resource there. I see what you're doing, type of thing. So it didn't grab me very much as a 2-player game, but I would definitely say that's probably not a problem in a game where you have more than 2 players. But that's a disappointment for me, because a lot of games that I play are 2 players, and it's sort of a requirement for me to hold on to a game. I will say my wife really likes this game. She likes it more than I do. My first impression of the game was, I don't know how I feel about the game. I need to play it again. I play it again. I don't really know how I feel about the game. And after playing it, maybe 6 or 7 times, I still don't know how I feel about the game. And for me, usually that's a pretty bad sign for a game. Usually when I don't know how I feel about the game, usually as time goes on, I feel less and less positive about it. There is an exception to that, and that's Concordia, which when I played that game for the first time, it felt very dry and very bland and not something that I really wanted to maybe play again. But when I did play it again and did play it again after that, that game has started to grow on me. But it started to grow on me after a couple of plays. This hasn't grown on me yet. It still might. And maybe if I played it with more players, it might grow on me some more. I still am having a hard time with that doubles concept that I don't like. And sort of the fact that these factions are all the same and you're kind of fighting for the same thing over and over again, because whatever you fight for here is the same thing there, is the same thing there. And that kind of didn't interest me so much about the game. Overall, I can't say I disliked the game, but I can't say that I was totally in love with this game either. I am sort of still neutral on it. I still don't know how much I like it. I don't hate the game. I'm not in love with it either. So that's Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia. Mr. Tetsuo says, my wife's gateway Euro style game. I love this game in several ways: theme, art, component quality, and above all gameplay. Bumping is a brilliant idea, and I think the bumping is one of the innovations in this game, and it is a really nice feature. Has a lot of meat with tiered resources, goods, set collection, and a bit of hidden information. Easy to teach and fast to play. Downgraded to a 9 after more plays. During the game, I wrote a solo variant. My main gripes: the recruit powers. While the variance is nice, there are far too many cards whose effects are negligible or barely used during the game. Kind of definitely agree with that. I think the card deck is a little inconsistent, and a lot of the powers aren't really, in my opinion, really worth it. Second, the ethical dilemma, despite having 2 usage options, really is only used to trade a star for one or two artifact cards. So, and I felt the same way too about that ethical dilemma. It was a little bit of a wasted opportunity to have 2 different options when really the only option with that ethical dilemma of value is getting rid of one of your stars, unfortunately. Midnight Madness says, as far as dice worker placement games go, I think I still like Alien Frontiers better, but this easily has the chance to move past it as my dice worker game choice with a few more plays and figuring out the nuances and strategies. Lots of options and paths to victory, and I really like that in the game. Very nice mix and balance of resources and cards, and I like the way it works. All works together. Very well thought out game. And yeah, the big comparison is to Alien Frontiers. And I think as a whole, I think Alien Frontiers just works better as a whole because I think the cards work well and all the spaces on the board are worthwhile to go to and work well, and is a variety. But the main thing is Alien Frontiers is a lot meaner game too. So if you don't like the meanness of Alien Frontiers, maybe Euphoria is the better choice. I just don't like how all the parts work together. I disagree that that everything works together well. I think the balance is not there. If it had gone through more testing and more balancing of the different areas and different ways to play, I think this game probably would be up there, but I don't think the balance has been worked out yet. Senior Ku says, this is a tough game to rate after just one play, and normally if it's just one play, I don't really pay too much attention to the review, but in this case, I enjoyed it but some of my fellow gamers thought that there was something missing. I like how the markets punish whoever isn't in them, but in our 5-player game, as soon as someone started to build it, it was an automatic rush to complete it. And that's the point that I felt was important here, because in the 2-player game, that's sort of what happens with my wife and I in a 2-player game. If someone starts trying to build one of those markets, you want to get in on it because you don't want to suffer the penalty. So it's like as soon as somebody shows some indication they're going to begin building a market, there can be this mad rush to build it. So, and then when that happens, then the next market kicks off, then the next market kicks off after that. So it's just kind of a rush for these markets. An additional play with 4-player has me knocking it down. I still enjoy playing it, but there are definitely things about it that aren't usually there in games I really like. I don't like the fact that there is virtually nothing you can do to stop the other players. I don't like that the winner is usually determined before the game ends. A flaw of these game ends when you place your 10th star games like Alien Frontiers. It's true. Because you can knock other players' dice off the board and actually get the dice back, you are actually sort of helping them. You can't really block people or necessarily really slow them down in any way. That's true, but I think on the other flip side of that, in Alien Frontiers, if you're in the lead, you can get really beat up on. So with Alien Frontiers, if you go out in the lead, you're going to be cut down fast. And if you want to win the game, you don't necessarily want to jump out to that early lead, because people are going to start going after you and taking your powers away or taking your cards and such. So it's almost the complete opposite in Alien Frontiers. I think that's the part of Alien Frontiers that I don't like, is that it's so easy to gang up and take down the leader. And I don't like that. But on the other hand, in this game, you can really run wild. If you're in the lead, there's really very little anybody else can do to slow you down. So, and if you've got a good sort of machine going, you're going to win without much else anybody else can do. So I think that is an aspect of the game. And it's one of the things I don't like about Alien Frontiers, but then you have almost the opposite extreme in this game, where there's absolutely nothing you can do to slow anybody down. You can't even really annoy them in this game. All right, what Jay Gurria says is, what kills it for me is the incredible amount of uncontrollable luck you get in the game. Beginning with the pair roll. Why should I gain an action if I roll a pair? This is very unfair. I know that if I roll more dice, I have a better probability to achieve this, but I still rank it as very unfair. Also hate the luck with the artifacts. If I draw a couple of them, I can do many powerful actions when other players need 3 to do the same. And I think both with the dice, I think this was something that I had mentioned earlier about rolling the pair of dice. I don't like that either. It's just completely luck-based. And I hadn't mentioned anything about the cards, but this is also true, and this is also a very good point. When you draw cards, if you happen to draw a pair, you can do with 2 cards what other people it takes 3 cards to do. And it's just a luck of the draw whether you get pairs or not. There's no other factor involved there's no strategy to getting pairs. Let's see here. It goes on to say, the recruit powers are very unbalanced, and it is luck if you get a good one or not. And this was another thing about the recruits, that I think there are clearly some recruits that are better than others, and if you get a good draw on one and the other players don't, you can have an advantage. Worst off are the buildings, as they are face down. You don't know which ones are powerful. The negative effects of some buildings are very damaging. Even if the buildings are face up, some player would get hosed more by luck than by skill, i.e. player order, if I roll pairs and so forth. And I think on the buildings, some of the buildings are probably more damaging than others, and they're all face down. And you don't know which one you should really guard yourself against until it becomes face up, and then it's too late. I think that's true. It would be nice to have some kind of a hint as to which building you might want to be going for, but you don't see them at all. And this is another kind of repeat of what another player, commenter had said. The knowledge doesn't seem. The knowledge is the amount of rolled dice, the amount you get on your rolled dice. Doesn't seem very relevant. They are only used on the mines and to see if I lose a worker. So you put them to see what place on the matrices you get, as I had said earlier, and also to see if you lose a dice, and that's it. The number you roll is pretty irrelevant other than for those two things. You don't get any special ability or special access to any certain spaces or anything. And I found that to be a little bit of a letdown as well. So, all in all, I think the game has some really neat innovations, but I just don't think it really comes together well as a package. I personally think there are better games out there to invest your money in right now. If the game went through some more revision, I think this game really could become good. But that's the problem. It wasn't put out in the state that I feel like it should have been. And, I like what Stonemaier Games is doing, and I think that as far as, trying up-and-coming small publishers, I mean, they're probably only going to get better. But I can't really support a game that really isn't quite finished or balanced out right on its first run, no matter how much I want to like it. And I really wanted to like this game because I really like the theme, and I really think there are some really neat, clever mechanics in this game. Unfortunately, it just doesn't come through for me, and that's the bottom line. But other people seem to enjoy it, and if it works for you, I think that's great. I mean, if you get enjoyment out of the game, that's the point. And my wife enjoys it. So I'm not going to sell it. I'm going to hold on to it because my wife enjoys it. Perhaps it will grow on me. Perhaps Stonemaier Games will work on this game and do the sort of something like they've done with Viticulture and update it and upgrade it and make it better. But I don't think I can fully recommend this game to people in the state that it is right now.